Good afternoon. Today we're going to be looking at a person with 15 plus years of industry experience who's been an architect who's designed, developed, and implemented solutions mostly in healthcare and IoT domains. And he holds the TOGAF certification, Scrum Master certification, and couple of IoT certifications. So we'll take a look at what is uh, what is his career path forward, and what could be the kind of niche areas that he needs to concentrate going ahead. And we will see that as we progress through things. So I think, yes, please go ahead and talk a few things about yourself.
Thanks once again. As you mentioned, I have about 15 plus years of experience and in wide areas of technology and also on domain and also on management. To give you a brief, snippet of what I've been doing over the last many years has been, I've been a seasoned developer. I've been part of many architecture teams. I've done, as part of RFP, I've been part of writing proposals and also in terms of managing the teams well, both from a waterfall model.
Yes, please go ahead.
Waterfall model and also on Scrum delivery mode. And I have also completed TOGAF recently and passed my certification at this point of time. And I'm looking out for opportunities both from a solution perspective or might be from an enterprise level architecture perspective.
Okay, that's good to hear. And so what kind of role clarity are you looking at going forward? So you want to position yourself as a solution architect, a technology leader, or a person who would mix domain and technology skills together and solve customer pain points. Now that you've done the enterprise architecture certification using TOGAF, so what exactly would be your career path that you are actually looking at?
Uh, to answer to that question, now there are two parts which I have envisioned at this point of time. One is, in terms of technology and domain, that would also be extremely good because I carry, a lot of healthcare domain, and I've been part of, how US healthcare has progressed from a very nascent stage to an, mature state. So the value of contribution that I could bring forward with that, aspect of both functional and technology.
Yes, please go ahead. So you were talking about your career journey on. So what have you been done? You said you've actually spent time as a developer, then as an architect, who's been involved in requirements gathering, played the role of a technical manager, and laid your hands on various parts of the project development cycle, and mostly worked on .NET technologies and Azure and IoT kind of areas is what I could see from the profile. So yeah, please go ahead. Uh,
Yes, and the other part that I would wish, after being motivated and going through TOGAF certification and what really TOGAF brings in as I think an umbrella under which I didn't understand earlier, but I think it's given me a tremendous scope from solutioning, moving from solutioning all the way up till even business architecture. And I would be quite enthusiastic, and I would relish most probably even that side of path wherein I impart of business architecture and bring down and drill down and then be still part of solutioning and still be able to manage and then execute. So all aspects of ADM bringing in, and I would still be quite happy to be doing that kind of a role too. So then if domain matches I'm good enough, and I would feel great that I can contribute much more to the that specific domain. If not, might be technology and even in delivering business critical aspects to the management is what I would look at.
yeah, I think once you go up the ladder and you understand the technology, so once you have done an architect certification like TOGAF, your ability to mix business and technology skills actually that holds a lot of value because your domain knowledge along with your technology skills on how you can actually solve customer pain points is what you need to be highlighting in your resume going forward, because you know how to do it once the business requirements flows to you from the customer. But then how do you connect these two things, and how do you actually codify the vision and mission from the business side to translate into technology requirements is what the enterprise architecture certification brings to the table. So you'll have to craft perhaps the architecture principles on what are the business principles based on which you will actually create some sort of architecture principles for you to walk the whole 9 yards of the journey. And then how will you translate the work items or work tasks in the ADM based on the architecture principles. And then obviously, since you've got a good amount of exposure across the length and breadth of various client projects, it's quite possible that you worked on multiple different clients with varying requirements. Like you've got the agile angle to it. You worked on waterfall projects. You also worked on big architecture projects, especially in Germany, from your resume that you brought about. So when you've done this, you should be able to mix business and architecture skills in a good proportion and be able to drive forward things. So you could actually look at things like engineering manager position, or senior solution architect, uh, or somebody who was there as solutions lead for companies. I think that's where you need to position yourself, and you'll need to find out how do you break up on the architecture so that it is future proof. And you need to also bring in the digital angle these days, because most companies are looking for people who actually have that digital exposure. What does actually going digital mean when you've done? So you've done some IoT related projects. So what is actually going digital in the IoT journey? So I think when we discussed offline in the mentoring sessions, I think we just mentioned that going digital is all about serving the customer, knowing his customer context, and making sure that he gets the best experience for the money that's being spent on it. So like they say, Facebook was not the first social media app to have captured the interest of its customers. They were MySpace, they were Orkut, and a lot of other guys initially. So if you are able to serve the customer keeping his context in view, then I think it makes a lot of sense to get the solution across. So along with the technology, because what happens is when you throw technology at technical guys or technologists, they typically mask the actual business problem and then they solve it in a technology oriented fashion. What the market needs today is a good mix of business and technology. So I think that's what you need to highlight as a part of your resume. What kind of business challenges did you get, and how did you translate them into technological artifacts using TOGAF? Then how will you actually, because one of the main takeaways from the enterprise architecture framework such as TOGAF is how are you able to build a reference architecture for your clients. So typically, if you worked on an IT project, or if you worked on, let us say, a few other projects that you've actually mentioned here, which is about creating
Web application.
yeah, web applications, and you actually done some SAP connector applications and so on. So basically, how you created layered architectures on how you can actually use these connectors to solve customer pain points. So in all of these exercises, what is the amount of reusability that you've created as an architect? Like how much of reusability have you enabled for the team to make use upon? How actually have you crafted the architecture in such a way that you got the architecture building blocks? Then what are the solution building blocks that actually match with the architecture building blocks? And how are you translating the design, and how are you keeping it isolated from the implementation? Because most often people mix the design and implementation, and then when they change the solution they need to entirely rework again. That's not how architecture should be created. So they should actually create it in such a way that you're having a healthy mix of you're creating futuristic long-term architectures that stand the test of the day, and they serve a long-term purpose, because your architecture should be agnostic of the implementation. You should not tightly couple yourself. So those kind of things is what you need to highlight as a part of your resume, like your ability to create futuristic long-term architectures, ability to mix business with technology, ability to actually create and codify organization and industry standards, then your ability to have the governance structure in the architecture, like how did you take certain decisions, what was the rationale behind that, how do you craft architecture principles, for example, and then how do you actually use a structured way of creating architecture so that people come and people go, but you as a custodian of the architecture is actually taking care of those aspects of the architecture which will help the company to move forward, and no matter who comes or who leaves the company, there is some amount of body of knowledge which would be there for the people who are stepping into the company freshly, and for the existing ones also. After 6 months down the line, maybe all of that need not stay in your memory. So you need some kind of reference architecture to fall back upon, and also to reduce the rework, and you're not reinventing the wheel each time a client request comes. So actually, those are the kind of aspects that you need to highlight yourself. And then, of course, one thing that you need to be prepared for is what are the key architectural decisions that you have taken as an architect, which will stand you out from the rest of the team. So what were the in any of your projects you need to be prepared for? Okay, one or two salient features of the architecture that you recommended and that got implemented as a part of your journey. So you need to bring out those aspects and what are the kind of best practices. And if you had any anti-patterns in IoT or cloud designing, you need to bring them also into picture, saying, okay, this is not how you should be using, this is how you should be doing things. So you need to create those aspects. And then, of course, how did you create customization in these projects? How did you do localization, for example, if you did that? And then how did you do multi-entity or multi-tenant architectures is what you'll be quizzed upon. And then how do you enable long-term futuristic architecture, which actually is vendor agnostic to the extent possible. Of course, it's a SAP shop or a Microsoft shop, you stay with them, but what kind of decisions did you take, the hard decisions that you take needs to be highlighted as a part of your thing. So that's what I see as one of the challenges that you need to be bringing upon. And you actually written how you used, yes, 4+1 view quite effectively, and how did you use the TOGAF solutioning views to create multiple different solutions which will help you to, so that needs to be there. How do you create different artifacts, and so that that helps the client and as well as the internal stakeholders to be on the same page. That's one thing that you could do. And how effectively have you used knowledge management should actually come out as a part of the thing, because TOGAF talks about something called enterprise continuum. So how did you ensure that people inside the organization and outside are connecting to some kind of a taxonomy or a verbiage which will help connect both sides of the table quite well? How do you do that? That also needs to be done. That's one thing. And then, of course, you need to improve your articulation skills. You may know the concept, but how do you put it in words is one thing that needs to be done. So keeping it in words is the most important part. So your ability to abstract a lot of things and talk to various different stakeholders quite effectively is what differentiates like an okay architect with a great architect, things like that. So you need to have that ability to talk to different layers of leadership with their kind of things. Because if you ask a developer, okay, what happened with a particular a problem, he may say, I've got a 403 internet error and this is what is happening, and this is my stack trace. It failed in file null error exception in this line, this source file, and he might give that kind of an answer. But as you go higher up, if you say, okay, actually we are trying to connect the two systems, the payment systems is talking to the loyalty systems, and there's a message interface error, and maybe the message validation is failing. So this gives a much better way of presenting to the higher management or to your stakeholders internally or externally. So you get valued more as an architect when you bring that layer of abstraction. So hide the unnecessary details and present only in a crisp, clear, brief way what is really needed at that point of time. So I think those are the things that you would need to focus on, because most of us as technology people, we need to keep updated on technology, which is good. But along with that, as we progress, we need to mix business and domain skills with technical skills and finally solve the customer pain point and take on those things. And the other angle is that you can actually bring out is you've got a good amount of exposure in your resume on agile and scrum principles. So how do you mix that in a large setup where in enterprise architecture, the order of the days people just execute agile projects and get stuff done. But as an architect, there is still value for you to use the enterprise architecture dimensions, and how do you mix them with the agile practices, and how do you showcase value to your customer. So once this marriage happens between the EA and the agile stuff, so that's a good thing, because you know both sides of the table. You know how to mix things quick and fast, how to do the long-term planning. So once you know that, you become a valuable asset to the organization. So I think those are the things that you need to focus on, which I could see offhand, and I think we've had a couple of conversations offline as well, which will help you to do that. Any other things on your mind currently that you're thinking about?
I think the primary focus was to bridge in, because I definitely understand, having done TOGAF. So it gave me, oh, there's a lot more to it than what I was trying to do. So I thought solutioning, and then I used to capture requirements from the customer, and I thought that was the starting point. In fact, we were never even been explained, or might be taken through, or might be we didn't have that kind of a practice in the organization, wherein you sit along with the CEOs and the CTOs when they bring in those high level pain points or customers, or the way they want to drive their business in certain direction, to really translate that into a part of business architecture, and how the vision gets translated, the technical principles that were being imbibed, or the thought process that was being used to build those things. So we never had any of those things in the company which I worked with. Now I know what all questions to ask and where to begin, and what are the kind of things with the baby steps that I've made through. So I know there is a lot more on top of solutioning, apart from most of us know DA and T, not the business side of it. So yes, most of us would have designed databases, all the modeling and all of those things we have done. And application definitely are various styles of building applications, their architectures with various technologies we have done. And good that I've also been now over the last year and a half done on infrastructure also with cloud. And the only thing that has been left out in terms of my experience was maybe on the business side of it, how people would really drive those requirements, and in terms of even techniques of capturing the requirements. How do you bring it, and how do you project it, and what diagrams will help, where to help. I think that's a tremendous area which TOGAF really opened my eyes into. The rest of the things were okay. We all had done from the phasey solutioning and be that, but not the business side of the vocabulary, the language, and most probably the CEOs and GTOs would not be using what we are using. As you rightly pointed out, I think it has opened up my mind to really ask those questions, and I've already started putting those things into a recent discussion which I had with one of my friends. And he was quite surprised to know that I'm asking him all those questions which he never asked. And and I was able to bring in certain templates to them for another friend of mine who is trying to envisage a new project. They have vision, but they don't know how to take it forward. They directly get into vision and then jump into technology.
Yeah.
So I have made sure that I've given them certain templates from TOGAF itself, saying that I want you guys to fill up all of those relevant templates. Then only you will have clarity in your mind, even if you spend even an hour or so to really put your thoughts, because writing it on paper is much different than having everything in the mind. And it really it took us 1.5 hours just to come to that conclusion, that what I'm saying and what he is asking, realistically this happened 2 weeks ago. And he was trying to tell me something, and I've been trying to tell him this is how things are, but both of us are expecting something but we don't know where to meet. But finally, after all the things, when I shared the document and told him these are the main aspects of it that you need to really capture as part of the vision, then they realized, okay, Anil is making sense. It took us 1.5 hours just to come to a certain point.
Okay, so that's nice to hear. So what you actually put a design thinking approach to product development. So what do you feel needs to be done? Why, when you wear a designer's hat when you're developing products, what exactly Can you explain that a bit? How do you go about
Yeah,
doing that?
definitely, yes. I think I will take a minute before I get into actual design thinking of it, because this is something which I always looked at, latest technologies or might be latest way of doing things. I've been reading a lot on critical thinking aspect for quite some time, and at least trying to bring those aspects into my line of questioning when I deal with people and understanding the facts and the opinions very separately. And when we got into this opportunity of having building a product, we had envisioned at least three different products, for us to, really create them and then do. No.
Yes. So on the design thinking part of it, how have you actually incorporated in products is what we are talking about.
Right.
Go ahead and elaborate, please.
Yes. In fact, when we were part of, the product, envisioning the product that we wanted to create. So we said, okay, rather than being very rudimentary approach and trying to use our own, things in terms of what needs to be done. So we, at least I went and looked into a couple of things which I wanted to bring in some best practices and trying to adopt certain processes so that, that helps in terms of creative thinking. That is what, because I always look forward to a lot of new stuff, either in terms of creation or inventions or things like that. So I had an opportunity to look at, a program, a 1 hour video on, which was, circulated by MIT alone. So, they bring forward, the design thinking concept very well. So there are, at least.
How do you design a wallet for your friend? The first wallet. Was that one of the examples
No, not
from
the
there?
example. I think this example which was there on YouTube was really nice. It's an hour and 2-3 minutes, and that gave me an extremely good perspective as to how design of product should be done. What are the stages that have been there that needs to be done, and at each stage, what do you really do, and what are the outputs of each of those stages. And I think it's a fantastic video for any one of us. Very practical, very straight away. A picture depicts a lot more things. This was a wheelchair that MIT wanted to create, and they really showcased as to how you go about by designing things. Taking up a existing wheelchair, and how did they come up with the business value of it also. It talks about what really makes business value in terms of pricing and all that, and why. And a lot of debate happened in choosing, why this model is better than that. What are the difficulties they went through, meeting up people, and then showcasing, different wheelchairs, and then coming up with their,
I remember that.
yeah, coming up with their, new
Iterations
wheelchair
quite quickly.
iterations, and also in terms of giving it to the customer and giving the responses from the customer right away. So every time they went about by creating a prototype, so it went through those three people, and they would give us then a good, very important feedback as to, okay, this looks amazing, the handle was good, the wheels are moving quickly and easily, its ability to brake. And I also have the creative side of it, wherein I can use a wheelchair also for doing something else also.
Correct.
As for elderly people to hold things at the back, and then I think that was a tremendous thing, wherein the entire process of beginning from ideating to getting your prototype ready, then the mistakes that were there as prototype, and choosing what type of prototype to be done with the business scenario. So it has to derive business value for it.
Correct.
And not only that, if it doesn't make business value, then no point of having any kind of ideation and creation. And then finally, how do you really deliver it or come to an end product? So I try to bring in all those thought process, whatever that I could grasp from that, into the kind of design that we are doing in terms of process and everything, because we are a small team of three. So I think
so who was your customer in a small team size? So you guys acted as your own pseudo customers,
not really
or
that. So
did you have some real test dummy
know,
customers?
We had one dummy customer who used to do all kinds of feedback, giving us feedback.
Okay.
Because we never had
Typically,
the
it is a testing
liberty,
team or things like that.
liberty of going to different organizations and trying to do that. So, but we wanted to have the proof of concept ready, because there are a lot more changes, and we wanted to have. So we adopted all those actual things that were stated in that to really bring it, and try to get those benefits out of that. So quite happy to understand there's a process which is really there for creative thinking, and that gave me a good rather than being shooting things in the dark, we know what needs to be done. what steps have to be followed, just like any other process. What process, what questions to be asked, what kind of things that you do at each and every stage, and then you finally come up with a product which meets end user and customer and business value. Definitely, it has to make sense. So that's something which I really learned out of it. So it might be the driving forces might be either market pressures or time to market. So all of those things are there. So you will select two, three of those principles and then you know design things accordingly to that. So you might not cover everything, but you will still be able to focus on those three core things that you have thought through and then build things upon it. So that is something which I have gained personally trying to go through things and then.
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's really good. So that's one aspect which a lot of companies are focusing today on how do you apply those kind of principles which will add more customer value immediately from a customer point. Like sell to the customer the way customer wants to be sold, rather than you as a vendor trying to create something for your own, advancement kind of stuff. So that's typically how design thinking has solved a lot of big, hairy, wicked problems, as they call it today. So that is quite interesting to do that. And then I think you need to also probably touch. Or did you use any kind of microservices in the architecture? Microservices or
This year, I
so
have gone through a lot of sessions and training programs on microservices. I think the drawback and I think the adoption of it matters. Even though we would drive that, but either in terms of capabilities or either in terms of bringing that into actual practice, and then since it needs a lot of buy-in, and it has got its own set of challenges that needs to be addressed. And I think I would have went ahead and done it, but I think management decided that I think let's take it whatever we are working right now. Let's also keep understanding it, but slowly moving towards it. I think they took that kind of an approach rather than directly jumping into it and say that we will adopt this approach for this kind of project. So
correct, correct. So those are the things that you need to adapt into these things, and obviously you'll be counted for how do you use whether you're trying to solve the right kind of problem, because agile tells you how to do it right, but given your experience, I think you should also be talking about how whether you're doing the right kind of problems using a prototyped approach or design thinking approach. And then these days even large companies are thinking like startups. So how do you look and try to bring innovation in the things? We should have at least a couple of line items in your architecture journey that you've actually innovated these things, and this is how you added value to the customer. That kind of flavor also needs to come out based on how you are actually innovating stuff. So what kind of best practices have you used in terms of architecture validation, design validation, implementation validation, end-to-end code validation? So how you actually putting a governance team in place so that a set of architects validate that stuff and then you do it. So how do you use agile for large scaled up projects when there are 50, 100 people, member team who are developing from multiple geographical centers? I think those are the aspects that I think you need to touch upon. Then, of course, you should have some good thoughts on how do you do RFP, how do you respond to an RFP, how do you do proper requirements gathering, how do you do business architecture requirements. So there's something called business scenarios in TOGAF, which kind of helps you to do that. So that, along with your use case scenarios, you can actually mix and create something which is quite holistic and serves the purpose of the industry to a large extent. So I think you should be having those aspects also. But otherwise, I think what you have is a good, rich experience across multiple domains. But you need to be highlighting on all these aspects when you craft the next version of your profile, and then add these relevant skills to it, and most importantly improve your articulation skills on how you present it using an architecture mindset and a product mindset. And because people have that knowledge, but they have it in bits and pieces. They're not able to tie the strings together and give that holistic big picture.
Right.
So which is what differentiates you from maybe a top-notch architect in the industry.
Right.
That I think that goes a long way in what you've done. And I think apart from that, maybe add a cloud certification if you're interested in that, and then get an IoT certification on the side. So I think if you do that, I think you're already there. Just a matter of mixing your skills with what the industry wants and connecting both sides of the table. I think that's what is required. So I think it was nice interacting. Any other thoughts that you want to share across?
Right now, I think I'm just might be trying to ingest the kind of pointers that you have highlighted and what I should be doing on those lines to really meet those objectives. And I think my thought process will be mainly focused on that. And moment I have those answers, I would want to put those as part of my resume so that what I state is what I have. And right now, I think as you said, I need to tie all those strings. So I know that there are pockets of things that have all done, but how do I really say, okay, these are the things that is there, and this is how I begin, and this is how I end. And definitely, yes, in terms of articulation in as part of and business side of it, and also on technology side of it. So I would definitely want to focus upon those areas and see
Basically,
what is it that I need to, what is it that I need to cultivate, and how is it that I need to present is something which I definitely have to, spend some time on top of it.
Basically, you need to know how to make buy versus build decisions. How did you actually zero in on a particular solution? There could be multiple solutions in the Microsoft stack or Azure stack, but how did you particularly live with one particular solution, like think design, or how did you approach? Only why should I choose that particular way of doing it, as opposed to multiple COTS solution which are there in the market? That angle
I think not every project gives you an
that
opportunity,
flexibility
but
to think that way.
not every project is
Correct.
made of cards. But I had a great opportunity wherein over the last many years have done starting from buying component itself and trying to be part of the solution. So we didn't want to develop. I said we are going to buy this component. We did, at least I bought in a lot of things, evaluating of the component, validating the component to the business scenario, and also purchasing them and then bringing that as part of the solution. So I've done that. So at the lowest level, component also matters. So then, if you look at the higher level, is next is the application level. So our products that we would want to do. So I also work with making sure that we bring in products wherever we don't have domain skills or where in the business requirement we don't have those capabilities, we would partner with people who are top notch in that specific area and who have got products to it, and we build solution as part of integration with those specific COTS products. And so I had the opportunity to be part of those, and then I've done many alternative scenarios, different architectures with various styles of it with the customer needed, so that he can choose them appropriately based upon his budget.
Correct. So I think those are the aspects that you would need to highlight quite well. And then also you need to talk about how did you do risk handling well? How did you, what kind of governance, internal and external, are you exposed to with various clients? So did you, I think since having worked in the healthcare industry, you also have that HIPAA knowledge with you. So how did you make use of HIPAA to solve particular architecture problems? So that also you need to be able to highlight. And then if there is Obamacare in the US, you worked on some US projects, you need to put that also as a part of the healthcare stuff. So how do you translate governance, regulatory body activities into architecture pieces? So because as you go higher up in the career,
so I think I've done both of those, because HIPAA is definitely
exactly
regulatory
that's
thing.
something that you could actually
So,
highlight and show it in your resume, because I don't find a mention of that straight away. Although I could read between the lines and say that you have done it.
And
But
that aspect of it, and also on XBRL. So XBRL is again
XML based healthcare messaging.
Not healthcare. Healthcare, you have different messaging things. So you have EDI standards for it, and if you look at hospitals, they have HL7 standards, and if you come to banking, you have got SWIFT standards for message. For reporting purpose, you have XBRL. So XBRL is all about reporting and solvency reporting. So So there are guidelines which clearly say that this is
So I
how it
think
is, and
you
then
could create a
you have to
section
bring
in
in.
the standards part of it. What kind of standards that
Right,
are you
right. And
exposed
then
to?
NCPDP standards for
Yeah. So
prescription. So I've worked on all of these 4 or 5
correct.
different
Patient
standards.
information care standards or patient information
Mm.
details. How do you store them in the HIPAA part about it? What is the privacy side to it? If you've got some GDPR knowledge, you can add that also to showcase you've got a well-rounded view of the architecture. Because right now you just not mentioned all of those things. It's just
Right. So there are a lot of things that I've worked with, but
yeah.
really to
So
highlight
you'll need to
them.
say that this is where I'm good and this is what I've done. So employees find that attractive when you're in between jobs and you're trying to switch another job. You need to bring that angle also quite effectively so that people know what you've really worked on and what is that you could they could lay your hands on and what is the value add that you bring to the table. So that's one thing that you could actually bring. And then yeah, how do you do the architecture? How do you do the high availability part using Azure? That's something that you could be well prepared on. How do you create high availability architectures, like fail-proof architectures, which scales to hundreds and thousands and millions of transactions, and then it has that 99.39 availability or 59 availability, that kind of stuff. That's also something that you need to put. And if you put disaster recovery as a skill, then what kind of disaster recovery architectures have you built using Azure? What kind of Microsoft reference architectures have you used, white papers, and then how do you translate them into actual things? So all of those things you need to highlight and then make it more robust so that you are seen as a person who has this well-rounded knowledge about all these things and able to bring the picture, present the big picture. So I think that's been, and obviously I'm sure that the entire architecture sessions that we've had with mentoring has added a lot of clarity to your existing knowledge, which were there already in pockets, but then how to connect the strings together
Right.
and weave the big picture.
Yeah.
So I think I see that happening as a part of this exercise.
Yeah. Now it brings a lot more confidence to me when I speak to people when I understand where they come from, and I can align my thought process quite clearly on the specific areas because I have just finished TOGAF certification also. So that gives me, the entire thing is there in memory as to, where to start and where to end, how the entire thing gets connected. That is something which has really helped me a lot. No doubt in terms of business architecture, people doing business architects, they might be, well versed, deep, they can get into deep dive. But, I know what happens at that specific area and what is it that is somebody from a business side is expected to do and, bring about. That has given me a good, insight, especially in TOGAF with it. And practically at least 1 or 2 things which most probably when I sit with you offline to understand at least some what the industry is already doing, and I would want to ask them, people have already implemented their little bit of issues that they found, how that it really helped them. Okay, this scenario they did these things, so I would wish to know that, and so that at least I can groom
Yeah,
myself
so basically the
around
best
that.
practices part of it is what you need to be acquainted with. How do you use these patterns and how to also figure out anti-patterns when they are not really needed in the architecture. So how do you actually strike a balance between the trade-offs of good architecture versus bad architecture in particular scenarios, be it IoT or cloud or something like that. So you could also be part of various meetups, whereas tech talks that are happening in the industry, so you can just attend them for the weekend or something, and then you find like-minded people where you can mingle and exchange ideas. So that will broaden your. So it's like a journey, right? You've taken a couple of steps, and then you keep doing it more, and then you become an expert overnight. So I think that's what is there. And as what are the next steps? I think you just polish all of these things, and then be ready for I think whatever the action points as a part of you've discussed. So once you've done that, I think you should be where you want to take yourself, and I don't see any challenge with that. So I think is that fine, or you have?
Yeah, I think good that whatever things that you've highlighted. So I think it is now for me to focus upon those areas and do all the catch-up activity that needs to be done, and then might be bring in those points back into my resume so that the right kind of message is conveyed across to the customer. Even though we might have a lot of things, but we might not have conveyed that. It will be a one-liner which with a plain English language rather than articulating it in an architectural language. Even the resume should speak to that so that it looks appealing, that people understand. Okay, I have done a wide spectrum of technology, and also I understand things, but it has to be at the forefront of it.
Absolutely. So yeah, there are a lot of things that you could look at it. There was another guy who was in between jobs, and recently he was looking for a solution architect kind of position, but given his experience, they kind of gave him a business operations manager kind of a profile based on these things. So he actually now has to manage a team of solution architects because he's close to 2 decades, and even your profile is quite similar. So I think once you keep your eyes and ears open to all of these things, opportunities just throw up, and it's about what you want to align yourself with, and then do that. I think that's been wonderful talking to you.
I think I should say thank you, Kiran, for it's been long waited thing.
Yeah, we've been trying to meet a couple of weeks,
then,
and then I think
from your
because of
busy schedule, so I think I should definitely thank you for it, for at least bringing out things that I should be really focusing upon, and what is it that I need to put up as part of my resume. I'm really focused upon that. So thanks once again, Kiran, for all the inputs that you've given to me. It's been great, to be sharing this time with you.
Thanks. Wishing you all the best, and then look forward to hearing from you when you get on to the next opportunity again.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Kiran.
Thanks
Thank you once again. Thank
Thanks.
you.